Morning, Eric. How are you?
Good morning. Pretty good. Yourself?
Good. Except for that cold I think we had overlapping at the same time as went away and then has progressed into something worse. So
Oh,
it keeps dragging on, which seems to be typical for this part of the year or time of the year, but is never enjoyable.
yes. Yes. So far, I've been lucky. Uh,
Good.
it it
That's
didn't
good.
get embedded into my lungs. And
Hi guys.
Howdy,
hello.
Peter. Different. Where are you now?
Coffee shop in Calgary.
Okay.
A noisy coffee shop.
Okay. Oh, I'm not hearing that background noise.
Hey, I love the email you sent. You've sure done a lot of work on that.
Thank you. Thank you. And that whole the the constant chicken and egg aspect of it of and you don't realize what the gaps are until you move to that next piece of okay, how Eric and I and Peter and I think in separate discussions have talked about how to price something and thinking about adoption of what people want and the barrier of saying a fixed fee audit at the beginning, which was my initial thinking, and then looking at other models. And I still haven't fully gone through comparisons of the Oracle model, Eric, which is still just like one of those moments. But going through producing that, the copy, what's simple, and as I put it, share it with people, getting different feedback, and some of it's been really actually it's been really positive in terms of easy to digest. So, but I want that critical feedback of where the resistance might be and uh, yeah, just what to think about. So yeah, thank you, Peter. It's been a lot, as you know, but I feel like getting to that end because in defining integrated stewardship, be able to have this as something that explains it without it being too burdensome and too much prose and having to me, I like metrics. If you can't quantify it, it has no value.
Yep.
And then now to be able to attach this or share this with the post-secondary institution initiative to show that whole value chain from post-secondary institution to technology transfer to industry to feedback loop and how this can all play together and why it matters. So that's that's now where I was thinking yesterday as I was swearing at my computer because it's AI is not the quality is actually shit. And despite a lot of training and rules for the outputs I want, it's going through everything with a fine tooth comb to point out errors, and then old errors are repeated and driving myself crazy. So getting that out and just thinking of a turkey dinner and realize, oh, okay, this is good. Turkey's almost done, potatoes done, gravy set. Now there's only a few more things before I can throw this all out onto the table for everyone. So yeah, it's getting there. So now as I finalize that pricing and really what I'd like us to do is just who can benefit with it and make sure everyone can get a piece of the pie and grow and win and monetize and really that's my thinking for the next pieces and finalizing things along with the pilot that's being implemented with that fund in the companies, which is
Mhm.
another big piece with the developer and making sure everything's understood and um, yeah, so all the pieces in play. And that's really since the last time we talked has been everything I've been looking at and thinking about, along with poking through some of the other models that we spoke about last week, and really realized that Rendon Hoy covers those Japanese models that Eric had mentioned. So seeing how that was, the best practices were, understanding what they were, benefits of each one, and making sure the model as well has the right parameters for what I think, actually what we think, what I think is the right thing, provides the right guidance and recommendations. So good gut check, I guess, to go through those things. So thank you for that. And otherwise, you know what we didn't get into last week was the budget. That's what I wanted to dig into today and hear what you guys thought about what came out. And as I made a crack about it on LinkedIn, it was expecting a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and only coming out with a stage 2. So not horrible, but yeah, wanted to hear what you guys thought. Do we lose
Yeah,
Peter?
I guess I would describe it as well, if it's going to be terminal, it's still going to be terminal. And so, what is your quality of life? So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of this budget. I think I think I said it someplace else. Had they found 125 billion, I would become a liberal supporter. As it is, uh, they've a $78 billion deficit. Yeah, you can only take so much Keynesian economics before it flaps, really drives your economy down, right?
Yeah, which I
So,
thought we were already past that point, but it doesn't seem that way.
I think that we're probably going to get there because what's going to happen is they're probably not going to be within the budget, right? So a $78 billion deficit announced today, next year is probably close to $100 billion deficit after the fact. All of the practices that they're doing are pretty much just doubling down on the same principles. Now, I am perfectly willing to accept that the principles that what they're trying to do will be done more effectively.
Mm.
But I think what they're trying to do has already been proven in number of other countries to not be effective.
Yeah.
So, so they're going to do the wrong things really effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, that really doesn't help. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. I think it's more of the same. It's not any new thinking that's going to reverse the damage that was done in the last decade. And I think just from the everyday person being able to, if you look at affordability and providing any tax credits or any returns to family, child credits, or otherwise is ineffective. And what people don't realize is the overhead cost of administering these things, the carbon tax credit, whatever it is. And it's a net loss. It's not a benefit to Canadians. And as we look at food, housing prices, and what is going to solve improve wellness and a rise in GDP per capita, to me is the main indicator of how do we compare in purchasing power parity with the rest of the world, and are the decisions we're making driving us in that direction? And no, it's not. And to look at, again, the biggest delta, biggest increase in spending and objectives is, and let alone, like, this is not looking at the challenges that face us in terms of cuts to healthcare, in terms of housing supply, affordability, any of that. Looking at just where the opportunity is, and not addressing the increased spending in defense. And what does that mean for the rest of the federal budget? If we're looking at a deficit now, and it's only a shell game in terms of defense spending or the perceived amount of defense spent or defense budget, as the Coast Guard, formerly part of fisheries and oceans, is amalgamated with defense. And maybe we'll see Canada Border Service Agency amalgamated there as well to give this perception of increased spending, but to actually have real versus notional spending to hit that 5% or start climbing towards a 5% GDP and not affect anything else, that needs to be addressed, or we need to talk about the opportunity that's there. And as you, Peter, and I talk about, dual use. If we're not jumping on that freaking bandwagon, we're missing out. And yeah, I just want to stick my head in the policy, the big P policy offices, where these guys are thinking about these big ideas and where they're getting what recommendations or advice they're getting by which parties, and what they decide to accept without that, hey, Diane, without that, the evidence and what they're creeping towards. So I'm just always curious about the bright idea fairy floating around, tapping these guys on their shoulders, and how they end up making their decisions.
Well, I find did you look at the bright idea of 300,000 civil servants taught to use firearms and drive military trucks and become reservists?
No, I didn't see that. When did that? That's a novel idea. And Diane, we're just talking about the federal budget that came out in Canada last week, which was about 7 months late this year, as normally we'd have a fall economic statement that updates what we're doing and any priorities for the upcoming calendar year, but it's more of the same. And so the lost opportunity, or the messaging and how they're positioning things. So Eric just told me about something that's really interesting. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I saw that coming through the Ottawa papers.
Wow. Well, obviously on the American side of things, this is no better, no worse, it seems. It's there's a lot of statements that are made, and then there's a lot of like, well, here's another way we could do it. And I'm like, what's going on here? You know, if it's just let's float an idea and see if people don't hate it. I don't know. Just kind of like how it feels. Being a I'm actually less invested in the political realm, just because it would drive me crazy in some ways. I just have to sit back and be like, what can I do from a business perspective to do things that will put me in the right lanes for future economics, and look where the dollars go. Because y'all are like way more involved than I am. I do not have the history, nor do I have the patience to look at this stuff, because I have a very strong barometer internally, and it screams when there's machinations or manipulation occurring, and it's painful.
This is really interesting, Dan, because Eric and I have had similar discussions, but for different markets, where you both so the GPT I shared, you've both seen it. We've had discussions on what we think is needed in the world and what we hate about it, and how this could help and support that, but very different markets and attitudes. So Eric and another gentleman, Peter, who's on this call and disappeared, but will most likely jump back, have had in-depth conversations about how Canada is failing itself and what needs to be done, and doing it from the outside in, and enabling small, medium businesses to be able to come together, be able to grow, especially for dual-use companies, dual use being military and civilian applications, to spur innovation and growth, and be able to feed into the procurement beast and then influence government from the outside in, because the ability, the propensity to change anything within the bureaucracy will be impossible in the next generation or two because of just how broken and how far it's gone and how not objective it is. It's heavily influenced by industry. It's not for the citizens, and our best interests aren't there. So how do you do that? And we're aligned in that, and being able to empower others, where integrated stewardship and a mechanism that's easily accessible could be that solution. Now, in the US side, the culture is very different, and it's less reliance on government. It's more for a little long on the libertarian spectrum, and and the ability to create that benefit within corporations, communities, and bring people together, and not necessarily rely on government to be able to create the change. So very, very different culture, and same solutions can help those companies to grow, but with a compass to create localized benefits. So it's, yeah, two very different cultures, very different conversations and perspectives.
Yeah, that's a very, really, I like the way you're summing it up. And we're going through a take apart right now of part of it. But if you take apart one thing, you empower another thing. So if you try to take apart government, you empower large corporations. And if you take apart large corporations, you empower government, unless somebody does the hard work of empowering the middle class and the small to medium business. And so it's like, it's almost up to enterprises like our own, of what we're up to,
Yes.
to create that coalition without creating the corruption. Wow, I'm going to create a new, it's a t-shirt, coalition without corruption, right? That has to happen at a different level. And empowering small and medium-sized businesses really is the way. And what's happening is, if you don't put government in place to stop the engulfing of large corporations, I mean, this is very simplified, right? So obviously it's not 100%. Sometimes corporations do the right thing. I'm in a Fortune 5 corporation. We do and we don't. You know, there's a whole lot of yes and no, and a delicate balance, because once you're owned by a corporation, you're owned by the stockholders, which means that there will be two owners, not just for the greater good, right? And you can't lead by all nonprofits in the whole world. That doesn't work either, because you could see how funny things happen in there too, because there's a lot of favoritism and all the things. So it's like, how do you allow smaller groups to coalesce, if you will, around things that economically and from a demand perspective makes sense, versus forcing demand, forcing brainwashing, forcing all the things that could be out there. And again, I'm not saying it happens everywhere, so I don't want to sound like somebody who's going to go create my own little cult offense somewhere and tell everybody they're all wrong and that they're special and chosen. I'm not that person. I'm just noticing, and like, what can I do with my role here? Finding other smart people like you, and so pleasure to meet you, Eric, that we're all in this inquiry, right? Because it's hard to be in this inquiry. It's not comfortable. There's no one right answer. So staying uncomfortable versus finding something and saying this is 100% right, that's all wrong, is not where you have to be. You have to kind of be in the moment at all times, continuously choosing and continuously finding which doors open, because a lot of doors will slam shut once you put your, and like, it's just crazy. So I hope you don't mind. I'm kind of describing the situation of what it's like. And we've got two different experiences of it right now. And so part of me is like, woo, take apart. And part of me is like, oh crap, what's going to happen? Because there'll be a power grab somewhere else, and it might not be any better unless we have enough voice combined to make that difference and get in the door.
And a voice with backing. So if you look at, and I've spent, every one of these discussions triggers some other part of research that I've done over the years, and in-depth rabbit holes as I try to understand different problems. And I think it was probably 11 years ago where I started looking into the different minority groups in the US, and got into Thomas Sowell and reading his theories and the metrics, and then dig into that and understand gentrification, how land is taken over, expropriation, development of major lines of communication, interstates, and who suffers and why. And their voice doesn't matter because they don't have any economic power. They don't have any pull. So
Right.
how do you create that? And then shortly after that, I started looking at, as I started getting disenfranchised with government about our politicians not looking out after us and being internal at a level where my recommendations are going directly to those decision makers, to cabinet, and the evidence-based recommendations that had significant amount of consultations and were not chosen, and one after the other started to set me off. And then I started forecasting, okay, where's the world going? Looking at other problems in the world at a macro level, and then started looking at, okay, wealth divergence. This is accelerating. And coming back to Keynesian economics, this debt financing methodology has run its course. We're done with that. And what does this mean? Okay, consolidation of power. Where is that going? What's the trend? These oligopolies, these monopolies, the state, and the lack of separation between state and corporation. Consolidation of power and decision making for whose benefit? Not for the majority of humans on this planet. How do you influence that? And where is it going? So then thinking, okay, people are smart. What begins to happen? They begin to fragment. What's the term you use, Diane?
Oh, it's a coalition without corruption.
Yes, but you talked about people fragmenting, or you had used a different term.
Oh, take apart. Take apart.
Okay, right. So take apart. And in doing that and looking out over history, realize, we're moving to what I believe is a feudal society. There's going to be the separation, segregation, and people pulling back to create their own communes, their own civilizations, to be out and away from all that they disagree with because they have the means. Those who don't get stuck under that. So then my thinking led to, what's the solution? We have to empower those. How do you do that? There has to be shared interest, shared benefit, and those incentives to come together to be better, to live better, and what our kids need. So looking again, breaking that down into the family unit, the business. What does this look? The places of congregation, houses of worship, or otherwise, and then values and beliefs. And what it came down to is everything that I built into integrated stewardship was how do you incentivize people to come together, and what are people seeking, and what does that look like over all of time of what's the natural way that we live. We're pack animals. We will come together. After a certain size, it doesn't work. So that's where all of this has come from, is just thinking, oh shit, that's going to happen. Oh shit, this is happening. Oh, look at that. Oh, a pandemic. Oh, decisions made versus evidence. And now where are we going? Who won out of that? Who won out of 2008 housing crash? Who won out of the 1999 tech crash? Influence of military power. What is the narrative that's being told to us? So just doing this massive ongoing meta-analysis, which I just can't help myself with. And here we are. So that's the genesis of, or part of the genesis of what I created. And if I didn't have kids, I don't think I would have ever cared enough to look at it this way. Because I'd probably be merry, doing soulless things for the bad guys to make.
I don't have kids. I want to take care of everyone. I have a different mindset. So this lifetime, I was just not supposed to have kids. Period. End sentence. Biologically, whoops. And yet I see amazing spirits in everyone. Like I'm just very connected with bright lights, right? And that I see the good, and unfortunately I see the everything in everyone. I had a near-death experience when I was a kid, and so my connection with human suffering, my connection with greatness is all just right there on the surface more than other people's. And so it's okay. Most people did not have that opportunity. And it was, obviously had its costs for sure to kind of come to a place of balance with this. But there are people like me as well, where it doesn't just take children and that unconditional love for these little beings to do it. There's also those of us who are just connected with that possibility. And it's like the world's going to slowly expand and get better, or it's going to slowly crash and burn. And I cannot be a part of something that is slowly downward, right? Even if it's even in my own fiefdom, right? In my own little feudal area. What did you call that area? Like, we could create an enclave that works.
Right.
We can. We can create multiple and then create that structure and infect others, right? And I mean that infect, right? Like viral,
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah.
And I would argue that that's actually the way that we should be doing it, because if we look at history and we look at the teardown, what happens with the teardown is it gets very messy. A lot of people get hurt, and somebody nastier comes in, and it gets built up out of the teardown. And so you don't really want the tear down approach. You want the build up approach, where the
Right.
build up basically is the replacement, is the better option. And people migrate to the better option as they see that a better option is better for them. And I would argue that that's also better it puts less blood in the streets and less hurt for people. But I would agree that
Yeah.
the oligarchies in the last 20 years have gotten much worse, from my perspective, in North America. And so we need to come up with some solutions that can allow it to be better. And I think that's the build up solutions that can be put out virally and grow over time, because this isn't a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year type plan. This is a cultural plan, and it's going to take generation. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start it today.
I agree. Some things will fast forward it. Some things won't.
Yep.
We've got a really strange elastic period of pressure with AI adoption, and then the backlash that's going to occur as people seek connection. It's like, but if you have the connection in place with humans while this is happening, the backlash won't be as bad. But this is where that restructuring is available, and that safety and combined nervous system Hinesh and I are talking about in some ways is like, how do you create a society that's resilient because there's trust and connection and shared experience, that you believe something. Like, that's what they kind of do in the military. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there is a shared experience that you cannot survive by yourself. And unless you find a connection and a reason beyond yourself, it's not going to work. Like, you cannot get through boot camp without that. Not being someone who goes through boot camp, these are constantly the scenarios I hear from people who went through special forces training and things of that nature. You're not going to make it through if you don't find, for it not just to be about you, it has to be about helping the other guys in your platoon make it, or whatever grouping you want to call it. So I think that's also going to be part of this. People always remember where they were on 9/11. People remember what happened during Hurricane Sandy. People remember things, right? And I don't know the same likenesses. My apologies for Canada, but I'm sure there are many. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope this is helpful. I'm just framing, like, we have a really good opportunity now within the fact that it's going to take a generation. I agree, Eric, 100%. It's not going to be overnight. We can set the wheels in motion now, and we'll probably have an opportunity to fast forward a bit, just like COVID fast forwarded a bunch of things in my country. Fast forward by 15 years at least, some of the things, right? So right now, I think we do have that opportunity to get half generation's worth done in the next 5 years, which would be nice, which is probably only 10 years anyway, but hey, double speed, not bad.
Yeah.
So do you think the result, the response to COVID, do you think that was a positive in your country? From my point of view, I think it reinforced all the oligarchies in Canada, and it was a huge hit for our community and our culture. What do you think from your point of view?
I think it created a very subculture where they're much more manipulable because of their disconnection from humans.
Yeah.
And people blindly followed some things that we'll be finding out about for the next 15, 20 years in terms of health and the vaccines. I know that it triggered on a lot of conditions for people that were latent. And I don't think they were doing it from an evil perspective. However, it happened, and you just had to trust and put your livelihood into the government's hands, and they did their best. I don't think there was somebody doing something Machiavellian, but those who did not comply were severely, severely punished. They couldn't work.
Yes.
For those people who were self-employed, who had to work with humans, let's say they were in the service industry or something, they literally could not work. And
couldn't work,
yeah,
couldn't travel.
couldn't
And
do
I think
anything.
that
Yeah.
was the precursor to setting us up for digital ID and creeping towards a UBI and ultimate control. This is
Right.
where I see it, whether
Right.
that's planned or not, but a natural way to go towards pushing, again, not having or not presenting things in a transparent and evidence-backed way of the true holistic impact of moving towards EVs and the stress on the grid that's required, and being able to shut it all down, like our, say, thermostats. If you have a Google Nest and it's connected with your power authority, who is regulating how much you may get in the summer at peak use, what happens when everything's reliant on that, and so on. So that showed me what you're told, what you have to believe, and how you need to behave, without being able to push back and without having a choice. Otherwise, you're ostracized and lose rights or privileges. It was scary.
Right. Right. And that people said, we are 100% right. We know this. You have to trust us, versus, hey, we can't be guaranteed we're 100% right. This is our best guess, and this is all we can do. However, we have billions of dollars backing this, and we believe that we're going to have to take a good guess, and this is where we're going, and this is why, as opposed to we're 100% right, and if you don't believe us, then you're wrong and awful and not an American, or whatever you are, not smart, not anything, is the wrong thing to do. It makes my skin crawl. So I had to get vaccinated because my mom was in the hospital. I couldn't see her. She was she was dying from cancer. So I had no choice but to just get over it, right? And I got water blisters, and it triggered on Hashimoto's, it triggered on other autoimmune, it triggered on things that may or may have not remained latent in my system. And it made it easy for me to have to do the choiceless choice, but it was definitely something I would have considered otherwise, knowing how sensitive my system was. So just to let you know, there were ramifications. I'm not angry about it. I just did what I knew to do because I couldn't not see my mom. Made it easy, right? So maybe that was an easy choice, but for other people, they made the other choice, and now they're very angry also. And because of what happened to them and the financial setbacks and all the things. And they'll probably be smiling in another 15 years, but right now they're still very angry. Disenfranchised, right?
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting in that, like, if I look back, like this brought it to a fight, and I think that, like, we in Canada, we just slide along, slide along, slide along too often, and for us, I think this brought us to a point where it was no, hell no, and for a certain percentage of the population, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad, because it was uncomfortable with the disagreement. But we really needed to have that. Really need to be able to sit up and stand up for something and say, no, we're not going there. For me personally, I took it because I looked at the odds and I said, given my situation, yeah, I know that there's a lot of odds with this, and I know that the material coming out here is absolutely crap. Like, the data that was being passed around was terrible. But I looked at the odds and I said, yeah, okay, I'll take the vaccine because I think it improves my odds. Uh,
Yeah,
and
it did.
and and then a few years later, actually, I just about, like, a couple years ago, it was actually the viral treatments which were almost terminal for me. So it was not the
Oh,
vaccine,
no.
but it was actually the hospital treatments that you do, right? You never know how things are going to go, right? And but had I known more, I probably wouldn't have taken the virals, and would have risked it. But you don't know, and just admitting that you don't know is a lot more powerful than saying, "Yeah, no, we're great, we know everything. Oops, sorry, we were wrong." uh, that getting into that oops and sorry, when I make the choice, well, it's my body. I'm going to take the risk or I'm not going to take the risk. That's fine.
Right.
So
So I'm sorry to hear the outcome for you. And you know, my sister, my husband is very right, and my sister is very left. So no
okay,
matter what I do, I'm very like none of your business a lot of times, because or I'm neutral. Like I'm as neutral as I can be based on somebody who has health issues, whatever. And my
yeah,
sister is angry, got openly angry about people not getting vaccinated because they were like herd immunization is important. And I'm like, okay. And I do know of people's parents who died from COVID. I get that.
hmm,
I also have a stepmother-in-law who has lung disease, who like gets her lungs drained every 2 days, twice a week because of cystic fibrosis, and has been for like decades.
yeah,
She's never gotten COVID. She's had to take all the vaccines, all the things. And after a while, her doctor said, no more. You don't need any more. There's nothing useful with these boosters. But they keep telling them that this is a woman who's like literally, you know, in the hands of her doctor. She's 85. You'd
yeah,
think that like, so it's like crazy. And then there's, you know, my husband who's kind of like, hey, my body, my rules should apply everywhere, you know? So it's just kind of funny. So it's just like, all right, so but not really, because then he doesn't actually believe that for like, you know, women's rights or anything like that. But so it's like it only applies to a certain point until it hits.
kind of
Yeah.
hypocritical if it's
Yeah.
my body, my rules, but it's your body, my rules. That doesn't seem to work very well logically.
Right, right. So it just kind of like it's very funny because that's where things fall apart in the United States as well. It's like the people on the left are like, yes, you should be able to terminate a pregnancy, but you should not be able to not get a vaccine. Okay, wait. So your
Yeah,
body's your body unless it's not your body. We decide when it's your body versus not your body.
yeah. The really
So
frightening thing
yeah,
is I just understood exactly what you said.
yeah,
I'm not sure
yeah,
which is worse. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So we're gonna tell you when your body's your body and not your body. But
Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
So it's like it just at some point it's like, okay, where are we going with this? We've got all this extra security, all these things. I can't solve for that. I can solve for, will people be able to put food on their table? How do we create economic models that work? How do we support the middle class so it continues to be a going concern in our countries, and elsewhere? And how do we continue to build up that middle class in other countries, as if at all possible, if we can keep this model going, which I know Hinesh is doing a very good job at. And so I'm working to say, okay, Hinesh, how do I make your life easier? Quite honestly, as I'm figuring out what my future is as well, because I'm like, well, my world may or may not be sustainable with what I do.
mhm.
I'm a senior person within a large corporation. At some point, you know, I'm constantly working myself out of a job. Every 6 months, I find a new thing because they put me in what's broken. I fix it, I move on. The faster I fix it, the less job security I have, except for the fact that somebody else needs me, which is not a bad thing, but it's just kind of like, well, couldn't I do this somewhere else where it has more meaning? So, but so it's like, how do we create structures that work, that continuously need leadership that is very open and honest with itself? You have to provide some sort of confidence, but you can't be a guru. You
Yeah.
just
That's well
can't.
said. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think anything that facilitates, again, another deep dive into post COVID and where the world was headed after my brother's suicide, after looking at all these other patterns of changes across the world and realized what's lacking and then what is the solution in terms of the lowest hanging fruit, the least amount of cost, and what comes down to human needs. And what's scientifically backed with this evidence is really connection. Mental health improves, physical ailments decrease with increased healthy human connection. And COVID created us this really beautiful box for all of our families and not to interact. And over time, less participation of houses of worship. So to me, connection, collaboration, community. That's anything that focuses on that will lead to positive results.
I think it's really important to separate the COVID, the disease, versus the policy implementation. Because if we look at Sweden, the health and economic and impacts of Sweden versus just about everywhere else in the world, Sweden got it right. The rest of the world didn't. Okay. And that's a learning.
What happens? I'm sorry, I don't have the context. Please tell me what happened in Sweden so I can nod or not.
They didn't close down in the same way as most of the world did. And they said, well, yes, it's an aerosol, it's bad. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we're not closing everything down. We're not quarantining. We did make some modifications for an aerosol contagion, but we didn't quarantine. We didn't mandate vaccines. We didn't do all of those things. Okay. But we said, look, this is a really issue. It's a health issue. They attempted to trust their people and educate their people and say, well, wash your hands. If you're sick, don't go out. Those types of things. And that had a better impact. Like if you look at the economics numbers, you look at the effect on their children. You look at the effect on their on the number of people who passed, because you also have to think about who was the most likely to pass away from COVID. And when we saw those numbers in the first 3 months, we saw a trend already coming out of that. And we already knew that it was people with comorbidities were at the issues. Age was an issue. And those were the types of things that were already coming out before we started really blasting with the PR and, well, blasting away with PR, propaganda on the right or on the left or on whoever's propaganda that they want to put out, because it was propaganda. It wasn't science-based. And we lost so much when we moved to propaganda instead of disseminating science. And that's worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me. Thank you for that background. I'm glad to hear somebody came through it well.
One out of 190.
Well, it's a very educated country. They treat the women really well.
Yeah.
They're very egalitarian there compared with most other countries. And so they treated people like adults. That's amazing.
Yep.
You choose. Here's the information. And I don't understand why anything else would have been better or worse. But I mean, it's like I had a mantra with my sister because my mom was sick was don't kill mom. Okay, great. We're going to isolate because we can't bring anything back to her. Okay, great. Yep. We knew what our values were. There was a commercial on TV for, oh God, it was like one of the old comedians, and his son was also a comedian. So he's like, well, there's my dad, not going to kill my dad. I'm like, totally get it, and that's fine. It's not about you. It's about the people you love in your life. But then, you just have to be smart about it. If they're at risk, do what you need to do to make sure you don't bring it home to them. Okay, great. But that's your choice. That doesn't mean that everybody else is responsible for not killing your dad,
Yep.
or whatever it is. So it was just it was a weird time. And I just think people lost a lot, and the kids, there's a lot of illness that came out of it, right? And the funny thing is, like, they kept all the liquor stores open. There was a reason, right? Because people were going to isolate like that. It was like pretty crazy.
Yeah,
So
and here too.
one of the other things that I noticed was when we're talking about this, and we look at sanitation, over the last 200 years. So we've got a huge improve when we started taking care of water in the last 200 years, and clean water, all of that type of stuff. But we don't build, and we don't do our architecture. So we do our architecture for clean water now, but we don't do our architecture for aerosols. And we know that the prevalence or the likelihood of getting more aerosol pandemics is much higher today than it was even 100 years ago, because of density and the ability to travel and all of those types of things increase the potential for distribution. So why don't we build in such a way to make transmission of aerosol pathogens less likely? Because if you're going to quarantine a group, like you look at a high rise, we were in a high rise with 300 units. Okay, you got COVID, you get quarantined. Well, that's all central air. You're gonna pass that contamination throughout those 300 units. So by quarantine that one group in their home, you're basically saying, well, okay, we're going to contaminate it for everybody else, right? So you're increasing your risk unless you build differently with your architecture. So UV and HEPA filters and those type of stuff. But we don't. Well,
Interesting.
why not? It's not that we don't know how, it's that we choose not to. And we knew this before COVID. I found this out. COVID was it was a learning experience for me too, right? And I read a bunch of stuff and I found a bunch of these things, and they were all material that predated COVID. So why didn't we do this stuff?
Hinesh, my actualizer is Lisa Ambrose. She does like HVAC stuff.
Right.
And with Dustin,
exactly.
She partners with Dudley. Yeah. So I'm like, how perfect is this?
Yeah, that's it. So connection there for Eric's benefit is a technology, actually based on very simple IP that solves for that. So being able to, connect all these dots so that we get better outcomes is really the mission. And ending up in these circles where I met Diane in New Jersey. With other people that are like-minded and want to see more good in the world and are highly talented. So it's a really great network to be part of. So that's how it all happens. And why those decisions are made is a conversation I don't think we'll ever have time to cover on one of these things, one of these calls. But I think that's a good place to end as well. And really, I'm happy that you hopped on, Dan, so that I also after the call we had yesterday was thinking about what we're discussing at the beginning was just how things are separate between the two countries, the different discussions I have, and why any overlap is that Venn diagram is limited in terms of overlap, because culture eats strategy for breakfast, and understanding that is a big part of how you work with the different parties or stakeholders on either side of the border. So really meaningful conversation, because over time that is going to start crossing over on both sides. So awesome. I'm really happy that you two connected, because then there'll be more of this down the road and more cross-pollinating, because that's what will be required for more connection, collaboration, and community. And with that, I wish you guys good day and afternoon. And again, thanks for joining and always meaningful conversations. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Dan. Have
It
a
was
great
fantastic. Nice meeting you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.